For the first time in 40 years, a World Report on Disability has just been published. Together with the World Bank and the World Health Organization, it's about 350 pages, and it concludes that 1 billion people in the world suffer from some sort of disability. Now, this report will be presented today, right here in the European Parliament, by the Vice President for Human Development of the World Bank, Tamar Manuelyn Atinc. So thank you very much for joining me here for coffee.
Good morning.
Can you kind of summarise that report? I know it is 350 pages, but...
Summarising 350 pages is a tall order, but I'll give you some of the highlights.
Yeah.
You already mentioned that there are about 1 billion people, or 15% of the world's population, who experience some form of disability. Between 110 and 190 million of those encounter significant disabilities. The Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities defines disability as the interaction between a health condition and the environment in which disabled people operate. So I think what is really important here, and the report highlights that, it's not so much the health condition which is an issue, but it's really some of the negative attitudes and the inaccessibility of services and infrastructure that ends up leading to the fact that disabled persons are not able to contribute as much as they can to society. So the bottom line of the report is societies need to do as much as they can for inclusive development, find ways of ensuring that the gap between the capabilities of disabled persons and their current functioning is reduced.
Okay, and focusing on Europe, for example, budgets, governments are cutting their budgets at the moment. The most vulnerable are being hit as usual. So obviously people with disability allowances, they're going down. And there's more levies now on their medicine, especially with those for medical cards. So how can we get around this?
This is clearly a difficult problem. Europe is facing severe fiscal pressures. And certainly many governments are looking to rationalize their expenditure. My only message here is, in doing that, to make sure that the most vulnerable segments of society are protected, and that this is done in ways that don't generate increasing inequality in society. I was here attending a conference on inequality and the welfare state in Europe over the last 2 days, and this was one of the main topics of conversation. How one adjusts to the fiscal pressures, what policies puts in place, has a bearing on what happens to levels of inequality in the country and what happens to the poorest segments of society.
And there is a United Nations Convention for Persons with Disabilities. It was signed in 2006. Is this working? Are countries really implementing this?
Well, again, a good question. 150 countries are signatory, and regions are signatories to the convention. Of those, 100 have ratified them. But of course, the struggle is in the implementation, and this is something that we should be watching closely, both as institutions like ourselves and the WHO, but also civil society, to make sure that countries live up to the promises that they have had, being mindful, obviously, of the fiscal pressures and the difficulties many countries face. So it will take a while until we get to a state where we're all happy about the state of the inclusion of disabled people in economic and social lives.
Because as I said, this is the first time such a report a global report has been done in 40 years, and the next one this is to be reviewed in 2021. What do you think the state will be then for people with disabilities in the world, and of course here in Europe?
Of course, I don't have a crystal ball, and if I did, I would be making a lot of money these days. My hope is that what we are seeing globally these days in Europe and elsewhere in the United States will be a temporary dip in economic growth, and as economic growth resumes, and certainly it has been more robust in developing countries than in emerging markets where the majority of the disabled people live. So in that sense, I am hoping that the next report will be significantly more positive about steps that governments have been able to take in order to include people into mainstream of society.
Okay, Tamar Manuelyn Atinc, the Vice President for Human Development of the World Bank. I know you're only having a flying visit here in Brussels, so thank you very much for joining the EUobserver for coffee.
Thank you very much, Méabh.